Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, as you can hear and see, that we've been having some technical problems with the sound, but I'll carry on. And we do have IT waiting in the wings if we need to stop. So, welcome everyone to today's Planning Committee. I'm Councillor Linda Brockbank, I'm Chairman of the committee. I'd like everyone to be aware that this meeting is being recorded, and but also can I remind members to raise your hand if you wish to speak, please, whether it is part of the debate or on a procedural point. Today's meeting is a hybrid meeting. That means it's we're being joined by people virtually. Oh, that's even worse. Okay.
Hello? I've turned the volume right down. I've just turned the volume right down on mine. Yeah?
I'll let you know if I can't hear you then. There's a volume switch on the side.
Okay. Okay. Can you hear? Can you hear that? Yes. I'm at maximum. I think it's also. There's a volume there, down there, and they've turned that one down. So, can I just do a sound check? Can everybody hear that? Yes. Okay. Right. Great. Thank you. We'll go around the room.
Good afternoon.
That's on now. That's the same as setting as it was before. It's not working.
It's fine.
Let myself now.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, hopefully you can hear me.
Good afternoon. Is that coming through?
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Yep, just to confirm you can hear me as well.
All present. Is that working okay?
I've got a new microphone now.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Right, if we can just ask Piers, if you can just do as a quick test that we can make sure we can still hear you.
Hello, members. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Piers. Alice, if you would kindly do the same.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Thank you, Alice.
Okay, that seems to be okay. Thank you very much, everybody, for your patience. So we will continue. I'll pick up where I left off. I was explaining about today's meeting being a hybrid meeting. One very important thing is that when anybody is speaking, they need to use their microphones. If you don't use your microphone, the people who are joining us virtually will not be able to hear you. So if you're not using your microphone, I'll stop the meeting and give you and remind you to use your microphone. Before we begin, officers of today, we have joining us virtually Piers Riley Smith, who is a barrister from Manchester, and he's our legal advisor. Good afternoon, Piers.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Neville Watson, who's the planning manager for Craven District Council, and Vicky Davies, who's Democratic Services Officer. COVID restrictions are in place today. There's a one-way system. If you need to leave, could you use the top door, please? And it's marked exit only. And if you need to come back into the room, if you could use the bottom door, please. We do have some late information. Now, that was circulated on Friday by Vicky Davies. Are there any members who need time to go through the late information? Okay, in that case, I will go straight on to the agenda. So we begin with apologies for absence. Vicky, could you give us any apologies, please?
Thank you, Chair. We've got apologies from Councillor Place and no substitutes. Thank you. Okay, I'll record apologies from Councillor Hessel, Councillor Harbrand. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Moving on to agenda item 2, confirmation of the minutes of the previous meeting. If those are all okay, could I have a proposer and a seconder, please? Proposer, Councillor Liss, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Sutcliffe, thank you very much. All in favour, please raise your hands. That's unanimous, thank you. We now come to agenda item 3, which is public participation. Now, public participation, I will start that again. Public participation is not an item on which members debate, ask questions or make any decisions. It is purely for the Speaker to make the committee aware of the Speaker's issues. So we have a Speaker today, and that is Councillor Jacquin. Councillor Jacquin, would you like to come forward to the microphone, please, and give us a give us your presentation. You have 5 minutes in which to speak. And if you could turn your microphone on, please, if you're having any difficulty. I'm sure Councillor Brown will help you out there.
Yes. I simply draw your attention to one, reference number 23425, of the several recent applications for discharge conditions imposed by the planning inspector, who approved the original application, which is a housing site at the end of Aldersley Avenue, Skipton, for 90 and a few houses. You'll recall that Planning Committee deferred and refused applications for residential development here. The application 23425 seeks to discharge condition 12, the routing of heavy goods vehicles to the site to avoid Skipton town centre. This route is shown on the plan, which came out of the construction management report for the above application and has been circulated to members. I don't know whether everybody's seen it, but you all know. Brian's looking at it now. The condition was imposed by the planning inspector, not this planning committee, so the local planning authority is only obliged to consult technical bodies, in this case county highways, county sustainable urban drainage, Airedale drainage commissioners and the Environment Agency. The local planning authority cannot consult the residents of the 266 houses which front the route proposed for HGVs or statutory consultees, including Skipton Town Council. The proposed HGV route crosses Corder Lane Canal Bridge off Keighley Road and continues through the traffic-calmed Horse Close and Greatwood estates, then passing the Greatwood and Horse Close Community Centre, a recreation ground and the primary school. The proposed access route has been suggested by the developer, no doubt as the most cost-effective and convenient. It has been accepted by highways simply with the condition that deliveries were restricted to between 9:30 a.m. and 3:30 p.m. But the site working hours, 7:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. Do you consider these timings of movements will be strictly adhered to by all contractors, subcontractors and suppliers? I reiterate, the route has been traffic calmed with speed tables to make it safer. With increased HGV movements, there's a likelihood of an increased in collisions with street parked cars, damage to curbs and verges along the narrow Greatwood Avenue. There'll be virtually no chance for two HGVs to pass each other along this road. The plan of the proposed route mentions that vehicles without restricted access can enter the site via Shortbank Road. The recently completed Elsie Croft development has allowed 100 plus new householders to drive down Shortbank Road beneath the narrowed road at the Quarry Line Railway Bridge, which is regularly gridlocked at this pinch point. I'd like the local planning authority to show consideration to their residents and highlight these concerns to the current consultees. Highways may reconsider their response. The roads through the housing estate are traffic calmed, speed tables narrow with much on-street parking and may not allow HGVs to pass. I'm suggesting a safer solution. A temporary route from Ottley Road to the site until completion of the works would allow construction works to be completed economically. This option would be welcomed by the residents of Greatwood and Horse Close and motorists and pedestrians using Shortbank Road. I specifically mention these aspects to ensure my comments are recorded in the minutes of this meeting and the response is reported to a subsequent meeting of Planning Committee. Whatever the outcome of this presentation, All vehicle movement should be monitored, not sure by whom yet, to give evidence that the conditions have been complied with. Thank you, members.
Councillor Jacqueline, I made a mistake there. I read it as 5 minutes and it's actually 15 minutes that you're allowed to speak. Okay, thank you for that. I've consulted with the planning manager and you will get a reply, a written reply. There won't be any verbal reply to you at this meeting.
Yeah, I appreciate that, but it would be helpful, seeing as how the press are here today reporting what's been said, they get hold of the.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah. Councillor Pringle, did you?
I'd like a point of clarification, please. The ward member said that he had a solution and it was to bring the traffic in off Otley Road. Does that mean driving it through fields, or where are you going to get it in from Otley Road, please?
I'm sorry, but there's no debate on this issue. It will, Mr.
Chairman, I can help on that one insofar as any alternative access does not form part of the current submission and therefore would have to be subject to a completely separate application, which would involve haul roads, all sorts of things. That's not what's on the table. What we've been asked to deal with is to discharge the conditions that the inspector imposed, and that's all we can deal with. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to agenda item 4, declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations to make on any of the applications today, please? If you do, can you state which application and the type of interest, whether you're declaring an Appendix A or an Appendix B interest? Please raise your hand if you have it. Councillor Brown.
I know we've all got this, but I think it's worth declaring openly that I'm a member of Craven District Council and the application number 1 comes from Craven District Council.
Councillor Pringle.
And thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Morell.
It would be difficult to consider how we could be sat here considering this if we weren't members of Craven District Council. We're a planning committee.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
Add it on now. I don't see it as going to present any problems in the determination of the application.
So through you, Chair, can I just ask Councillor Sutcliffe then, are you declaring an interest as a CDC member? They did. Councillor Heseltine hasn't, and neither has Councillor Liss. Yeah.
Okay, but even so, it's up to members if they want to make that declaration. They're quite within their rights to do so. So moving on now to declarations of lobbying. Have any members been lobbied on any of the applications today? And if you have, please could you raise your hand and state whether you have been lobbied for or against the application. Councillor Sutcliffe, you've got your hand up.
I've been lobbied in respect of one application, Chair, which is the Hellifield one, and it was against it.
Thank you. Councillor Pringle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Application 22615 at Tosside. I guess the guy was lobbying me for it.
Hellifield one.
Against the Hellifield one. Yeah, sorry, I cut you off with my microphone. Okay, Right, moving on now to agenda item 5, which is the statement, the schedule of plans. So the first application today is 2020-21565 REG 4. It's an application by Craven District Council and the address is Land at Station Road, Hellifield. We have had a site visit this morning. I do apologise to the Parish Council and the applicants that they weren't informed of the site visit that we initially had. So we did revisit that site again today. Just to say that at the last planning committee, Councillor Pringle raised the following issues with regard to this application, and those were an issue surrounding the deadline for dealing with ELES applications and an issue of profit generated as a result of this proposal. Since then, a number of emails have been exchanged between officers and Councillor Pringle in which it's been made clear to Councillor Pringle that these are not material consideration. So members should be aware that any further deferral would stop this application in its tracks and thus losing the potential to provide affordable homes on this site. I'm going to just refer to council to give his advice, please, to committee, just to avoid any confusion or uncertainty that might have gone before. So if you could, council, please give us your advice on this.
Yes, of course. Thank you very much, Chair. I hope you can all still hear me, members. In relation to the first of those points, entry-level affordable homes, I can confirm the planning practice guidance produced by the Secretary of State on first homes sets out very clearly that that won't apply to full planning applications granted permission before the 28th of December of this year. Therefore, if, and of course it is an if members were to grant planning permission and that decision notice is issued before the 28th of December, then the entry-level affordable homes will continue to apply to it and not first homes. In relation to the matter of profit, and I know it's also dealt with in the officer's report, and I'm grateful, Chair, for you setting that out as well at the start. As members will be well aware, you're here to consider this application according to the development plan and according to any other relevant planning material considerations. Profit is not one of those, and it should play no part in your determination of this application. I can't be more clear on that point. You may believe this accords with the development plan and you should approve it. You may believe that it doesn't accord with the development plan and you should refuse it. But certainly profit should play no part in either of those considerations. Unless I can assist further, Chair, those would be the comments I'd make on that.
Thank you very much for that clarification. We'll go, a little bit of technical issue. Okay, right. Yes, you may.
Pressed it twice. How to get out of the habit of doing that. I found the planning solicitor's presentation very difficult to follow, and I missed parts of it, and I don't know whether you can improve the quality of the response, but it seems to be coming over very different from the previous.
Yeah, okay, thank you for that. Is it possible just to turn up the volume a little bit on what's coming out of the Piers, please? Councillor Pringle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was hoping the solicitor would have come back to us before today, but can I ask him to clarify something, please? He said quite clearly there that whether there's profit or not, we're not allowed to look at. My view is that exception sites are specifically not for profit, to the point where it actually says in the rules about them, developers have to have an open book policy. So you actually have to show that you're not making profit if you want to build on one of these areas that otherwise you wouldn't be allowed to build on. So I can't quite understand how he says, no, it's not material, you can't look at it, when the principle is fundamentally underlies what lies behind these exception sites. An exception site is where you build where you normally wouldn't, because you're building affordable houses. It's something that's quite clear in the definition of why they are. So can I ask him to clarify that, please?
Well, we're just, can we come to that after, because we're just set up now with the officer's presentation. So we'll come to that after the officer's presentation.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So I'll make sure everybody can hear me. Right, okay, so the application was deferred from the previous meeting so members could undertake a site visit and also for the submission of a heritage statement. That is all available on the website. Also, just to draw members' attention to the late information report. Obviously, since that last meeting, there has been discussions with the heritage advisor ongoing during that time, to the time we've got the other two formal comments back from him. Those information that he has provided has been informed in terms of the recommendation before members today, in terms of it's still recommended for approval, but I just found some clarity in terms of additional conditions that have been covered in terms of what the Heritage Officer recommended and suggested. But just to let members know that those comments were informed in terms of the recommendation before members today. So I will just start the presentation. So, yep, as already mentioned, this is a site which is a council-owned site, the land at Station Road in Hellifield, and it is for the construction of 13 entry-level homes with associated infrastructure. So this slide in front of us at the moment, oops, sorry, it's very sensitive, is this? Very sensitive. I do apologise, let's leave it that way. So as members will remember from the last presentation we did, this is the site location we've got here, location plan. So these are the properties that already exist on Station Road. So where my cursor is at the moment, these are existing terrace properties, two-storey terraces. Then we move on to the single-storey bungalow properties along this area here. Then there's a detached property just in this location here, and then you've got what would have been, I believe, the station master's house, which has been split into two further on up this area here. Just moving across here, you have the station up in this area up through here. The conservation area runs along this area here, and then as you can see from the red outline that my cursor will now follow, actually starts to project out away from the actual site, ending at this point here. So what we're looking at in terms of the actual application site, it's not within the conservation area, but it does abut it in terms of this end of the site here. It doesn't affect any of the listed buildings. You've got the Settle train station here, or I should say Hellifield, apologies, which is approximately about 60 metres away. And then what you've got is the Wayleaf, which is a signal house, which is approximately about 30 metres away, which is in this kind of location up here through here. So from that point at the end there down to the centre, you've got about a 32 metre separation distance from the end of the conservation area there to the start of the boundary here. And then when we take it from that point to the farthest point of the actual application site, you've got about approximately 53 metres away from it. In this area here, you've got a recreational area in terms of that. The site itself is relatively level. You've got a piping through here, so you'd have to have an easement through there. This is the actual access to the railway maintenance area to the back. Some members will have noticed that within that area there are a couple of storage, quite large metal storage containers situated within that area there, and also that as the back of this boundary here, the land actually starts to slope upwards in terms of the site as well. So this area, which has got the railway infrastructure in terms of this area here and the railway line, is on elevated land above the actual application site. So this is just a Google bird's eye view, just to give those who weren't able to attend the site visit a bit more clarity in terms of it. So again, as mentioned, this is the existing dwellings that we've got around this area. Obviously they continue further down to meet main road of Hellifield, and there's also further dwellings on this side that we've got down here. So this is the actual site itself, and that's the far end boundary of the site where the conservation area meets it in terms of that one there. And this is the easement that would remain unaffected by the actual proposal to allow the railway to still maintain and function their requirements in this area. And you can actually start to see from the Google Earth, you can actually see some of their infrastructure already there in terms of their storage containers, etc., on their part of the site. Now, the next site that we've got is a view up from Station Road. So again, you can kind of see the existing properties that we've got there, the bungalows there, and you can just see beyond the bungalow the two-storey property, semi-detached property that we've got there. The actual station itself is beyond the trees right at the far end that we've got there. So our site is actually in this area here. So just where that car is parked, that is roughly approximately the area of the site that fronts onto Station Road. This is just a couple of images in terms of, again, give us some context. So this is looking into the site. So this is the hedge that fronts onto Station Road. Then you've got the boundary, some unplanted or not maintained trees and shrubs and things throughout the site. And again, you can see that it is relatively level in terms of that. And that's showing you the easement to the land behind it, which, as you can see, is quite an elevated above the actual application site. The slide down below is looking back up Station Road. So again, you can kind of see you've got the road running up through that will lead you up to the station. And again, you're looking in through the site and you can see the actual infrastructure that Network Rail have got in the terms of this area here. And then right at the top, that is the actual railway line itself. The next slide itself is just to give some ideas of the actual character of the area. As member will have appreciated as they were going up through there, there's quite a wide variety of different styles, materials and ages of properties along Station Road. We've got the traditional terraced properties. These are ones shown on this slide here are in stone, but we've also got some that which have been rendered, which are a little bit of a later addition as well. Then we've got the single-storey properties, which are right in front of the application site. Moving across and down, you can see in this top slide here, we've actually got it just in that bit there, you can see the newer properties, and then again, a row of traditional, I would say more modern traditional terrace properties in terms of that. And again, you can see the different design in terms of how they look compared to the more traditional ones in this slide here. This is the much later development, which was also affordable housing, I believe, on Hellifield Street. So again, much a difference in terms of its appearance and the use of materials within the site itself. And again, just that bottom one here, just to give you a different idea in terms of the differing styles which are actually present on Station Road. And then this is the one that's right at the top, which is actually being now split, I believe, into two properties, although one side of it does look as if it's currently vacant. So that's to give an idea in terms of the actual overall appearance within the street itself. So the proposed development that has been put forward for the 13 entry-level homes, as we can see in terms of this area here would result in the terrace properties here, and that mimics the properties which are opposite the actual site itself. Now, because there needs to be an easement through here, we are unable to obviously build on that. So that's going to create an access to the rear of these properties. So these properties here will have rear parking. Now, this is reflective of some of those properties already on Station Road, certainly at the far end, where they also benefit from rear parking areas. So again, that's picked up a feature from that particular area. We can also see that these will have private amenity areas to the rear of these properties as well. There will also be small front areas that front onto Station Road, which include a small low-level wall and shrub planting into the front as well. The next two properties that we've looked at are these two here, which are the semi-detached properties that we've got here. So again, we've got them slightly orientated differently in terms of the developments. Again, these will have access through here. So again, parking will be to the kind of side, to the rear of these properties. And again, they will both benefit from rear parking amenity areas as well. Then we turn down, going further up along Station Road. These are the detached properties that we've got along here. Now, in terms of the parking arrangements here, these have mimicked really the ones opposite in terms of the bungalows that we've got here. So they've got parking to the side, so they will be able to come straight out onto Station Road. In terms of the boundary treatments, we've got proposed low-level walls in terms of it. We've also got a high-level wall in terms of this area here, and then there will be timber fencing through the site as well to define the rear boundary areas and amenity areas of these properties. It's also important to say that Network Rail will be maintaining their fencing all the way along the back of the site in terms of trespass to make sure that that doesn't actually occur. Now, Highways have looked at the development in terms of the internal layout and have raised no concerns in terms of the internal layout. They have also looked at the site in terms of its potential impact on highway safety and have not raised any objections in terms of that element either. The development has also been in discussions with the lead local flood authority in terms of that, and they have raised no objections in terms of the scheme. There's been a lot of discussions, and they support this proposal subject to the use of the condition ensuring that the drainage is implemented in accordance with the plans which have been submitted. The next couple of slides are in terms of the actual appearance of the dwellings. So the first slide that we've got in front of us is the terraced dwellings. As mentioned, there's a number of examples of similar developments, even in Hellifield itself, just as you're coming in of these, on the way out of Gargrave as well. And that slide at the bottom was just to show an example of what they will potentially look like. Members previously were a bit concerned in terms of the materials that were being proposed. We've clarified that as terms of natural stone under a slate roof, with stone windows and doors surrounds. Heritage Officer is happy with those, subject to a condition reference samples being provided, which is included anyway as part of the permission. This is bottom image here just to show you the location of the proposed terraced dwellings. The next slide is the detached properties that we've got. Again, the slide at the bottom is to show you the location of these ones. So again, these are picking up some of the features in terms of the local surrounding area. There's a picture here shows of a similar design within the Craven area, but actually in Hellifield itself, in the newer development that was just down from the site, there is a similar sort of overall design in terms of the properties within the site itself. So again, that's picked up a couple of the features which are already present within the Station Road area. Again, these would be natural stone under a slate roof with stone windows and door surrounds. And these are the semi-detached properties. Again, similar materials to those already proposed for the other properties, and these would be located in this area here. So again, similar to the actual detached ones, just slightly got a different sort of orientation in terms of the return. But again, it's a similar sort of design that we've seen numerous times within the district itself. And this is considered in terms of its visual impact within the street scene, not to result in any visual harm in terms of the street scene, nor on the wider conservation area. In terms of the proposed landscaping, what we've got in here, just to show members, this area in front of the buildings would be low-level shrubs in terms of there, so shrubs and hedging along through there. Then we're turning around through here. We've got hedgerows along the back end through here, plus shrub planting, plus tree planting as well in terms of those areas as well. Similarly, we've got areas along here. We've got two quite substantial trees which would be replaced in terms of this area here. You would have shrub planting in through here. Grassed areas as well would be to the rear of these properties as well. Moving along this area here, we would have hedging and shrubs along the front of the properties. grassed areas to the rear with wildflowers. And again, you would have trees planting along the back of the boundary with the railway land to the rear of the property, sorry. Down in this area again, you would have more hedging through here and also another tree in this area and another one in terms of this area here. This is always, this is managed by one of the conditions within the approval to ensure that once planted, should anything unfortunate happen in terms of a tree die on site or whatever, then it would be replaced for a like for like. In terms of parking, which was one of those issues, I just want to make sure we haven't slipped yet. In terms of parking, there was a concern about parking in terms of the height on that lane, or that road, I should say. So this was just a slide just to say, being taken at the same time as the site visit in terms of parking that particular day. And you can see that there was ample room within that street to actually park. Just to clarify further, in terms of the parking arrangements, the whole of Station Road, which we've got here, in terms of rear parking, there is a number of areas to the rear of the properties that actually have the benefit of rear parking facilities in terms of that. And we can see some images in terms of those taken along this side here. When we're looking at the opposite side of Station Road, there is also this slide here, and this relates to this kind of area here, has already created off-street parking, which actually, because it's an unadopted road, doesn't need actual planning permission for that to occur. The new development, which is in this area here, again has created parking to the rear of the properties and also on the road fronting onto Station Road. So again, all of that is fronting onto Station Road. Around and up and down the remaining part of Station Road in terms of these areas up through here, again, a number of properties have already created their own off-street parking spaces, as well as some of them benefiting from this slide shown here, from parking to the side between the rows of terraces. It's important to note that because this is an unadopted road, anybody along that road could actually create an off-street parking space without the need of coming through to planning in terms of that. So in terms of the examples of the proposed biodiversity, there is some biodiversity within that site, but unfortunately the site hasn't been managed. So it has deteriorated over a period of time in terms of what actually the biodiversity is present on that site. So what is being proposed is, yes, we will lose the trees on there, but as the tree survey says, these are very poor quality, have a limited lifespan in terms of those trees that are going to be present there on the site. And as some members will have noticed from the last site visit, there was some storm damage to one or two of the trees. So there will be replacement tree planting and shrub planting, and all of this will be managed and maintained for a period of time. There'll also be flowers and grasses in the private amenity areas, again, to attract wildlife and insects to the area. We've got proposed bird and bat boxes also being provided around the site in terms of encouraging, obviously, different types of wildlife to come through. We've got the provision of native hedgerows and shrubs within the site, again, to provide a new and more maintained maintenance green kind of infrastructure within that site. And also the way it's being designed is to ensure that we maintain the corridors of greenness through there, so that wildlife and everything can actually travel quite easily through that site, and it means that it remains connected to the surrounding area. In terms of the sustainability, obviously the buildings themselves will be built to a very high level in terms of making sure that they're highly insulated. This will obviously make it cheaper for those residents that actually reside in there. Water efficiency infrastructure in terms of fittings, etc., will be incorporated. We've got low carbon boilers, there'll be solar panels incorporated. All of the properties will have their own electric charging points. The electric devices within there will be energy efficiency in terms of that. The green infrastructure and the tree planting obviously helps in terms of sustainability, in terms of reducing temperatures when we need to, but also to be able to soak up excess water, but also to deal with air pollution as well as they filter the air through. So in terms of that, it's considered acceptable in terms of the policy requirements. So in conclusion, the proposal is for 13 entry-level affordable housing. Now, the local plan is silent in terms of this, so we are going against the national policy. And in terms of that, as laid out within the officer's report, the proposal does accord with the national policy in terms of providing 100% affordable housing. The proposed dwellings have been designed, and this has been with consultation with the heritage officer in terms of these developments, to provide a form of development that would not result in any visual harm to the street scene, nor will it result in any visual harm to the wider area in terms of this development. No amenity issues are raised by this proposal, and the proposal will provide or help provide open space contributions in terms of the area, and that's outlined in the officer's report. And there's also sustainable and biodiversity benefits proposed. The proposal itself would not have an adverse impact in terms of highway safety. Now, it is acknowledged that in terms of heritage, there is a potential for an impact in terms of that. However, when we have applied the planning balance in terms of this proposal, and as outlined by the heritage officer himself, it is a less than substantial harm to the heritage, then the balance is tilted in favour of the affordable housing. And as mentioned right at the beginning, the development itself is not in a conservation area. Only one part of the site actually abuts up to the conservation area. And the listed buildings are within 60 and 30 metres away from the actual site itself. So as officers, we have taken on board what the heritage officer has mentioned. We have taken on board the comments which we found as being suitable and incorporated them within the proposal. But in terms of the planning balance, we considered that the provision of affordable housing and the other benefits as outlined within the officer's report tilt the proposal in favour of approval, and hence it has been recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, so could you take your presentation off, please, so we can see the virtual participants? Again. Okay, there we go. So I just want to come back to our council to see, Piers, if you want to add anything more to your advice with regard to the question or the response from Councillor Pringle. But then after that, after your advice, this is not material, as this is not a material consideration, then I'm going to move on to the rest of the speakers.
Yes, of course, Chair. I hope everyone can hear me, and I'll speak as slowly as I can. In relation to Councillor Pringle's point, which is, I believe he's saying that entry-level exception sites must be not-for-profit. With the greatest of respect, Councillor Pringle, I don't recognise that or agree with it. It's primarily a matter of planning policy, which is for Miss Muscroft, my apologies, but I'm happy to give my view on it in this way. Entry-level exception sites are being brought forward here under the national policy, the MPPF, and the policy is set out at paragraph 71. Entry-level exception site is defined within the glossary of the MPPF. At neither of those places is there any reference to an entry-level exception site must be not-for-profit, nor even is that referenced within rural exception sites either. So the answer to Councillor Pringle from a planning policy point of view, although I'll of course look to Miss Muscroft as the planning officer, is I don't agree with his interpretation of policy. I don't agree that entry-level exception sites have to be not-for-profit. I've seen nothing within national policy that suggests that, nor within any law that I'm aware of, and therefore I retain or confirm my original view, which is the potential for profit is not a relevant material consideration for this committee. I hope that's clear, and I hope that answers the councillor's question.
Thank you very much for that. So moving on to the speakers. Today we have a speaker from the Parish Council, Mr. David Statt. Is he with us today? Good afternoon. I think we met this morning at the site visit, didn't we? I managed to get your name correct this time. Could you switch on your microphone?
Right, is that it? Can you hear me? Sorry.
Your microphone will go off whilst I'm using mine. It's all right. If you just give me a moment. You have 5 minutes in which to speak. Could you introduce yourself first of all, please, and then go straight into your presentation? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Councillor David Statt, Vice Chairman of Hellifield Parish Council. Hellifield Parish Council strongly objects to this application. Everyone wants affordable housing. I have 2 daughters I worry about. To date, Hellifield has had an estate of 22 affordable houses built on Station Court, an estate of 23 affordable houses currently being built next to the school, and now another estate of 13 affordable housing you are proposing in this application, making a total of 58 affordable housing on 3 estates within a mile of each other. That can't be good planning. Hellifield is a Tier 4A settlement, and it would appear that Craven District Council is trying to unburden itself of all its housing quota onto Hellifield in an unbalanced and disproportionate manner. This land would be ideal as a recreation area for the benefit of the village. There used to be allotments on this site. They could be reinstated, as we have a minimum 5-year waiting list for allotments. A nature reserve could be created. It would be an ideal place for the Parish Council's proposed tree planting project for the Jubilee year. Tennis courts and a bowling green have been mentioned in the past. The children's play area could be extended into it. It doesn't have to be used for housing. I refer to Officers' Report 9.4 and ask, as Hellifield is a Tier 4A settlement, would the written ministerial statement on the 24th of May 2021 be a reason for refusal if Craven District Council didn't use the transitional arrangement? At no time have Craven District Council consulted Hellifield Parish Council or Hellifield residents as to what they think should happen to this land. I refer to Officers' Report 7.19. The proposal was advertised by a site notice and press notice. In addition, 71 neighbour notification letters were circulated. The Council has therefore met its statutory duty with regards to the publicity of this proposal. To date, every commercial developer has consulted us on their proposals before site notices and press notices were issued. I must admit they didn't always listen, but it's just Craven District Council that think a site notice is a consultation. Craven District Council are consulting residents on their proposals for the Coach Street and Otley Street areas of Skipton. They're even consulting residents on next year's budget, all online. It's easy enough to do. We are being treated differently because it's your own application. We are really worried about the safety of children crossing Station Road to the play area. This proposed new estate will increase the volume of traffic on an already busy road. It would be an absolute tragedy if a child was seriously injured or killed. Should you decide to grant permission for this application, we ask that you provide a direct access from this development to the play area, thus avoiding Station Road. I refer to Officer Report 7.14. Station Road is an unadopted road, and therefore, if residents seek traffic calming measures, this would be achieved via a private agreement between the residents of Station Road and the Highway Authority. This report does not say that Craven District Council own half the road for nearly a quarter of a mile from the station to Station Court. We have to wonder why, as a majority owner of the road, Craven District Council don't share our concerns and just dismiss it as a resident's problem. Should you decide to grant permission for this application, I refer to Officer Note 10.1. There is no mention of securing planning obligation towards the external unadopted road that Craven District Council own. This also needs to be maintained and included in the Strategic Manager's delegated authority. At last month's meeting, a barrister advised you that you could legally determine this application, but ask yourselves if you should. As a councillor, I signed a code of conduct. I presume you all have as well. I know what I think, and the vast majority of our electorate do as well. How are you, Craven District Council, going to explain that you are now judge and jury on your own application? It would seem that Craven District Council are giving themselves an easier ride than they would a commercial developer. They're trying to unload all the housing quota onto Hellifield when we already have 2 affordable housing estates within a mile of each other. Our safety concerns for the children are being ignored. No one has asked Hellifield residents what they want. 48 objections have been ignored. Hellifield Parish Council's objections have been ignored. And to cap it all, Craven District Council are deciding their own application. This is your chance to do what's right. Please, we urge you, support us, refuse it, kick it out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Statt. We don't have any members of the public asked to speak on behalf of objectors. We have no applicant or applicant's agent asked to speak. So I'm now going to ask the ward councillor, Councillor Morby. I can't see you. Are you behind a oh, there you go. Right. If you wouldn't mind coming forward, please. And again, you, if you could switch on your microphone and introduce yourself and then go ahead with your presentation. You're not limited to the 5 minutes, but you know.
Thank you, Chairman. Mine won't take 5 minutes because I'm going to be like a broken record, I'm afraid. I'm Councillor Chris Morby, ward member for Long Preston and Hellifield, and I've been for nearly 10 years. I'm going to keep this quite brief. As you know, you've heard me go on about the safety issue regarding Station Road, Stroke Midland Terrace, and I usually agree with highways, but I'm afraid I have known issues where this planning committee has disagreed or members have disagreed with highways, and I'm afraid I disagree with them on the safety aspect. Again, in 1996, there was Waterside Lane was put in place to protect the residents on Station Road, Stroke Midland Terrace, and we have seen a colossal increase in traffic since that time. So I think that members should be aware of that. We've just had, and I keep going on about steam excursions, we've just had the Flying Scotsman here on Saturday, creating a lot of traffic again. Great, I love to see Flying Scotsman. Unfortunately, we're a bit foggy this time. I've commented on various issues regarding the planning on Hellifield Station, and because of that, it has increased the traffic. And I'll read yet again from the planning decision made in 1996. Station Road is an unadopted private residential street, which is considered to be unsuitable for serving the proposed development. That was the Hellifield Regeneration Scheme, but we've had more since then, which have added to it. It's been commented, and it does say there that it's a private residential street. It's been commented that people have created off-road parking areas. Why should they have to? They own half of that road. It just seems abysmal. And it's been spoken more about parking than the safety issues regarding travelling vehicles. We know that is the only way into the Hellifield Station at the moment, so we have HGVs going up and down there. 44-ton Arctics, and it's not very safe, not very safe at all. And you know what may happen in the future if the line opens up to Clitheroe and Manchester. And as Councillor Statt has said, I think that the children's safety is paramount, really paramount. And this is where in the summer the children are playing and we're getting the steam excursions creating all this traffic. So, as I say, I'm like a broken record on this issue, so I will shut up. Apart from this, again, I will quote from point 9.71 in the officer's report. Development should only be prevented or refused on highways grounds if there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety. Well, I believe there will be an impact on highway safety, and I will go against North Yorkshire County Council. There is also the aspect of, I think that any development on this road should not be allowed until there is an alternative route to the station. So I request that this application is refused. But if it is decided to pass this application, I ask that conditions are put in place to control parking for contractors working on the site and conditions for HGVs delivering, and request that they are not allowed to park on the street. I have seen the damage that has been caused when the last development was done, HGVs parking on the street, turning on the street, and when you get, well, an 8-wheeler tipper, 32 tons, screwing round on the street, it damages it, and this road was not built for HGVs. So if you would please take these points into consideration, it would be much appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Morby. I'm looking at the case officer to see if those conditions that Councillor Morby mentioned. What are the possibilities of those? And also, I don't know if it's in your report or not. I can't recall seeing it in the report about the applicant making good any damage that's done to the road during construction.
Yep, through you, Chair. In terms of a condition about managing construction workers to the site, I'll draw members' attention to condition 4 within the officer's report, where prior to the development actually starting, they have to provide details of parking arrangements, etc., for site operative and visitor vehicles, and obviously storage of materials, etc., and hours of work. So that is managed in there in terms of, I'm just trying to see where you are, sorry, Councillor, I was trying to look where you were. That is there in name to manage that, to make sure that the impacts are limited in terms of that. Yes, there isn't actually anything in the report itself in terms of making good the road, but the council would, should that need necessarily transpire, that obviously the road deteriorates further because of the development, then yes, we would make good anything that would occur on that road.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm just going to refer to planning manager. Do you want, and is there anything you want to say?
There's nothing that I would wish to add at this stage, Chairman. I'll answer any questions if necessary later on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. In that case then, I'm going to open up the debate. Councillor Brown, are you raising your hand?
I can't claim I'm going to be quick. Legally, the rules on entry-level exception sites are quite complicated. Morally, I think it's very clear. Craven District Council needs to follow its own local plan and be seen very obviously to comply with the things we require other people to comply with. So I'm going to try and speak entirely to local plan policies as far as I can, because I think morally that's what we should be guided by. And also that seems to be in line with the advice our barrister gave us, that it should be judged on the local plan, on the plan. Second thing I want to say is this comes with gains and losses. So anybody I disagree with, I think it's a reasonable disagreement between people who've got different points of view about a complicated case. The gains are pretty clearly that in terms of housing supply, 5 2-bedroom houses, 8 3-bedroom houses is not a small gain, it's a significant gain. Against that, just a little bit of downside. For Hellifield as a tier 4A village, which is not meant to have heavy development, we're meant to have 24 houses across the whole period of the plan to 2032. There seems to be 26 approved on the last information we were formally given, so we're already 2 above the 2032 level. And if the parish council's numbers are right, now we see no reason to believe that they're not. Then already he's seen signs of 45 affordables approved in a village that's meant to have 24 until 2032. So we're over the need, and the price of a 3-bedroom semi, which some of these is a strange thing to think of as an entry-level property. I'm not sure how many people will be able to afford a 3-bedroom semi as their entry into the market, but it's a genuine gain. There's some housing gain that is of the right kind of nature. Secondly, there's genuine gains about the way that they've been thought about environmentally. We've got EV points, we've got solar. There's nothing innovative like ground source heat exchange, which this site could have been appropriate for. Instead, we've got low carbon boilers. Can I translate that, people? That's gas boilers, which are being phased out by government policy. So we could have perhaps done more about that, but I'm not objecting to it on those grounds because we've made some progress. It's also quite clearly and genuinely a sustainable location. We're often told things are a sustainable location. Here, you can walk to the station very easily, and you can get to places, without getting in your car. So that's genuine. On the downside, 48 people locally and the parish council are against this. That's not an insignificant fact. There is the amenity issue of the road, and we've heard a lot about road safety, and I suppose we have to respect Highways' judgment, though I don't agree with it necessarily. But we don't have to ignore the amenity value to the neighbours of the fact they own half the road on our half of the road. If it's being developed, we need to do it in a way that respects them. So one of my first questions is, can I add an advisory that the applicant should enter into negotiations with residents with a view to making up the road to an adoptable standard and placing suitable no parking signs? Can I add that legally as a condition? That's what I want to know. Because I think that might handle some of the amenity issues for the residents. Next issue I want to raise is biodiversity. And I've got to say, I just simply flatly disagree. The idea that you can cut down a wood and replace it with a housing estate, and that represents no biodiversity loss, is just wrong. And I'd like to read you our policy on biodiversity. It says under page 141, I think it is, of the local plan, development proposals should achieve benefits in biodiversity that are equal to or, where possible, exceed the biodiversity value of the site prior to development. But if you look at that area to the north, it's got mature trees that didn't come down in the storm, and they were tested to extreme by that storm. They are mature trees that are occupied by birds, which you could hear singing this morning. So, there's no question that there's biodiversity loss, not gain. The only question is whether the gain of that extra housing outweighs that genuine biodiversity loss in contrary to our policy. And the idea that flowers and grass in private amenity, flowers and grass in private amenity areas, is the equal of a mature ward, or the corridor of green between various individual private properties is the same as the corridor of green that still equals or less bad is just it's just wrong. And I accept that the tree officer has said individual trees are not worthy of, but it's not a question of individual trees, it's a question of a group of trees to the north of the site in particular, which brings me to the Heritage Officer's report, which we had in May from Mr. Hinchcliffe, and I've been told on several occasions in this committee, I can't disagree with Mr. Hinchcliffe because he's the expert and I'm not. And Mr. Hinchcliffe in his report in May said at paragraph 4.2, I consider that the proposed development north of the Wayleaf involving the loss of trees will have a most harmful impact and would need greater justification. That's the advice of Mr. Hinchcliffe made in May. And he went on to say, issues of removing tree cover are wholly unacceptable. That's the advice of our expert. We've had in the last week a new heritage assessment review. I'm not sure why we paid for two, so I find that an interesting situation. The new one indicates, as Mr. Hinchcliffe did, that the south part of the site is fine. And he indicates the north part is in impact is less than substantial. That's somewhat contradicted by a map he shows at paragraph 3.4 of the Settle Carlisle Conservation Area appraisal, where the site in question that we're wanting to develop is quoted as making a strong contribution to the character and appearance of the area. That's the conservation of area appraisal, which we are required to take account of. Strong contribution to the character and appearance. Mr. Hinchcliffe then had a chance to revise his opinion, having read the report of a second set of experts we'd paid for. Mr. Hinchcliffe's view was, in one of the two letters that you'll all have had a chance to read, I stand by my advice that the loss of openness and greenery to the north part of the site will cause a level of harm which is on the margins of less than substantial and substantial, and so will require greater justification. So he's still standing by his advice. In short, what the experts seem to be saying is the south is fine to develop and the north is not, which leads me to another question. Can I legally place a condition, or can we pass half of it, not the other half? Because basically I am very comfortable passing the southern half, but I'm virtually certain I can't do that. I am extremely uncomfortable with passing the northern half, and if I've got to do that, I'll have to vote against it. So if we could clarify, is my understanding right that I cannot do what I want to do, which is pass the southern half and reject the northern half? I will have to vote against the whole thing. Final points to make is, can we make those material points that the Heritage Officer asked for, stone for walls, stone for sills, heads and coins, etc. And can we also take account of the parish council's direct access to play area point, which could be fairly easy to achieve and cheap to achieve, but could be helpful in terms of safety. That's me done.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Councillor Brown. I'm just going to refer to either the case officer or planning manager, whoever wants to take that.
I'll leave you to do with specifics, but on the issue of a split decision, no, you can't, because quite simply, you are dealing with the application before you. You can't say this bit's okay, but that bit's not.
I feared as much. It leaves me proposing rejection. So I'll formally propose rejection.
Okay, before I ask for a seconder, I'm just going to ask the case officer to answer the rest of yours, and then the seconder knows what they're.
Okay, yep, thank you, Chair. I'm going to try and work my way backwards, so if I miss anything, Councillor Brown, please let me know. Okay. In terms of the proposed direct access to the actual play area, there is actually a triangle of land separating the application site from the access from the play area. So, and I don't know the ownership of that land in terms of that. So, and we have to really consider what we've got in front of us at the moment. So unfortunately, I don't think that is going to be possible. In terms of the materials, The condition, there is a condition within the actual report itself. Let me just see if I can quickly find it for you. No, I can't easily find it, but it does go in there in terms of requiring samples. So even though we've got confirmation of what those materials are, as officers, we always like to see those materials to make sure that they are exactly what has been specified previously. In terms of a couple of the other points in terms of that, as officers, we've taken on board the comments that the Heritage Officer has made in terms of this site. And as I stressed, it's not in a conservation area, but it does sit within close proximity to the Settle and Carlisle railway station sort of thing in terms of that. It is set down, and yes, there are trees within that site. Unfortunately, we don't like to lose trees if we can potentially not. You know, we will fight to keep trees where we can. Unfortunately, in this instance, those trees are going to go because they are of very poor quality that we've got there at the moment. What we're trying to achieve instead is to get a site where we've got good, strong trees that are being put there that will then be managed and maintained, and they will flourish. So it's a trade-off, and I get what you're saying in terms of that, and it is the northern part which is, you know, the more effective in terms of those trees, but we have to look at it as the wider area of that particular site. And there will still be trees beyond our site, which is in the hands of the railway station, going up to the station itself, and there'll also be trees the other side of the fencing on the railway side that'll also obviously be retained and won't be affected by the proposal. So there is that trade-off in terms of that. We've had to make a decision that, unfortunately, based on the reports that we've got in front of us, those trees really can't stay there. They're not, you know, as you said the other day in the storm, one or two of the trees already had damage that had occurred because of that weather, and it's felt that to replace them with much good quality trees is a more appropriate way forward. In terms of the actual impact, it is a professional judgment in terms of that site. Yes, the Settle and Carlisle does make reference to it making a strong contribution. When you look at the actual mapping, I think it's, and apologies if it's not quite 100%, I think it's H3 is the viewpoint that's kind of looking along in terms of that. But actually, when you look at that viewpoint, I think it's referenced a little bit in the report, that viewpoint is actually got buildings in between it, it's got trees in between it, and the site is set down. So when we're looking at it, yes, it makes a contribution, but when we look at it holistically for the whole of the area and how it fits into that conservation area, we've thought, on balance, as a professional judgment, that we can develop something on that site that will not result in any physical or harm to the setting of that heritage asset, which is further, as I said, set back from the actual site itself. And it is a personal judgment, and hence why we are very careful in terms of making sure that the site moving forward is appropriate. In terms of the biodiversity, it is one of those ones which is, yes, there is biodiversity on that site at the moment, and you know, we are going to lose some biodiversity on that site. But unfortunately, I would go back to the fact that the site itself at the moment is degrading. It's not being managed. What we're looking to do is try and replace that with a more manageable biodiversity gain, which will grow and benefit as the years go on. The site itself, you've got areas where there's nothing happening on them at all, as you see with the road that's going through. You've got plants on there, but there's not a wide variety of plants in terms of that because of the fact that it's not being managed. Other varieties of plants haven't been able to come forward, and that's also restricting the levels of biodiversity on that site. But it is one of those things that we accept that there is a loss, but we also feel that what's being put forward is a biodiversity benefit because it is something that's going to be a long-term management on that site, unlike what we have presently. If I have missed anything else, please let me know.
Whether we can condition those.
Councillor Brown, can you use, it's okay, I've just come through the chair, but also I'm reminding you to use your microphone, please, so everyone can hear you.
Sorry, the officer asked me to remind. Just at the start, I asked whether we could condition the highway improvements.
Right, through you, Chair, again. We wouldn't be able to condition it, but we could put an informative on the report advising the applicant and the obviously neighbours in terms of maybe getting into a discussion in terms of that. I wouldn't want to put it as a condition because it's not, you're kind of forcing those people on that road to enter into an engagement in terms of a potential financial cost for getting that road up to a certain level, because they would have a responsibility. But I'm happy to put it as an informative to get the ball rolling in terms of that.
Well, I'm going to be asking you for your reason for refusal in a moment, but I'm going to take Councillor Sutcliffe has indicated. I'm presuming you want to second the.
That is my intention, Chairman, but I would also have got 5 principles jotted down here, which I would like to. It keeps going out, which I would like to talk to the committee about as well. So I'm happy to second it now. And then when I speak, it will become obvious why I'm happy to second it. Can I proceed now? Right. Well, I'll leave the nitty-gritty and the finer points to the Council of Bounds of this world, but my objection to this application is based very much on principle. Dealing with affordable housing, I'm an avid supporter of affordable housing on other sites, and we do have a tantalising offer on the table here of affordable housing, but in my submission, it's in the wrong place. Hellifield has already met more than its quota of appropriate affordable housing, and it's unreasonable to impose this development on them. The village does not have the infrastructure or the employment opportunities to support this level of affordable housing, in my opinion. Moving on to the local plan, and this is one that I do feel strongly about. After careful consideration, the site was not designated for housing. If we allow this application to be approved, we are driving a coach and horses quite simply through the local plan. A plan which took the thick end of 8 years and council taxpayers' contribution of nearly 1.5 million to bring it to fruition. I'm not happy at the present time to start, as I said, driving that coach and horses through the local plan. The application, I would suggest to members, would be a precedent for other similar applications and scenarios, and quite simply it would result in a steady erosion of local plans, which we fought so fervently for in the past. There's another issue here which did crop up. It's a minor one, which was the question of our obligation to dispose of council land where we can, obviously for a benefit. I don't rate this as a very high priority in the twilight period of Craven District Council. In 12 months or so time, the land may not even belong to Craven District Council, and any decision to sell it would perhaps be more appropriately devolved to the new authority, who may take a totally different view. Now, the road to the site, we could talk till 5 o'clock tonight on what's wrong with that road, but there's not very much right with it. The county highways have rather curiously said they've no objections. But if they were, I would submit to members that if they were to find any reason in assessing this application to caution us about problems with the road into the site, that would very likely, in the fullness of time, lead to a situation where there was a demand for the road to be adopted. And of course, that would have horrendous cost implications to the county council. They're only going to be here for another 12 months, and I don't think they'd want to leave themselves exposed to that possibility. And I suspect that their comment in response to this planning application was predictable. I'll leave it to that. So then the road into the site itself, I don't believe, Councillor Morby, coming from the construction industry, that you can develop that site without having vehicles parked on the road. There's two problems here. There's a big deforestation exercise to take place first, which will result in large vehicles taking chopped down trees away from the site. It will also mean bringing onto site some fairly sizable pieces of equipment to deal with that level of tree felling. And it's not going to be a week's job or anything like that. When they've cleared the site, it's only at that point in time that the levels will become apparent to the contractor. And you're then going to be faced with a sizable earth moving exercise to get the levels correct before you even start coming out of the ground of the house. That exercise will be large excavators, levelling equipment. The road itself will be covered in mud, and the residents will have a horrendous 12-month period when the construction of that site will frankly resemble a World War I battlefield. And no matter what you try and put in the way of measures to control what the actual contractors do, we know from previous sites that what we would like them to do and what we may eventually have to enforce them to do is not frankly likely to happen. The construction of this project would frankly be a horrendous intrusion on the residents' use of that road. And the road, I cannot see how we could do that sort of exercise without damaging the road. And then the question arises, of course, of who is going to pay for the road that's been damaged. Finally, the residents, as Councillor Morby has pointed out to us, I think the total number of objections now is nearly 60 in total. It's a sizable proportion of the residents of Hellifield. And I think that the spokesman on behalf of the parish council has admirably expressed concerns, but my conscience is that the local plan, I don't like the idea of reducing the effect of it by allowing this type of application. So, on balance, regardless of what you decide, Councillor Brown, I will second your resolution for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Sutcliffe. I'm going to ask the officer or planning manager if they have any comments that they want to make, because that was quite a lot of information that you put through there. And I think if we carry on with the debate, it's going to get lost. So,
can I just comment on the comment about driving coach and horses through the local plan? It isn't identified for housing in the open in the local plan, but this is an entry-level exception site, and therefore there is no conflict with policy, because you can't identify it isn't identified, but that would have been for open market housing. This is 100% affordable housing, and you're losing the opportunity to deliver affordable housing for the district.
thank you. Thank you. I'm just going to ask the case officer, because this, is there anything you want to say as well? And then you can come back with your response.
Yep, just to continue what Neville Watson has kind of said, in the report, we've kind of set out the fact that this is something that's outside of the local plan. You can hear me. And therefore, you know, we're not driving a horse and cart through the local plan. This is separate. This is something separate to the local plan, and it does accord with the government's idea of providing more and different types of affordable houses for the local, you know, for the community in terms of that. So it's not contrary to the local plan, because the local plan is silent in terms of this element, and it totally accords in terms of the national policy in terms of what we're seeking to do in terms of affordable housing. Just on the point in terms of mud and things like that on the road, as mentioned previously, condition 4 does require details in terms of that, and that they would have to clear up the road after if there was any mud on the road, they would actually have to do that. I acknowledge the concerns in terms of, well, what will happen on site in terms of workers, vehicles and things like that. But that's the whole point of that condition, is to make sure that the least impact on the local community arises. And you could develop that site without having any adverse impacts or limited adverse impacts on the local community in terms of that, because once you've cleared it, it is quite a substantial site. So we would be able to hopefully get a area of that site where the workers would park their vehicles, etc. So I think condition 4 does manage that quite succinctly in terms of that, and making sure that there's no adverse impact. And that's all I just wanted to mention at this moment.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Sutcliffe, John.
Very briefly. It's when you speak, Chair, that my light goes out and I don't notice it. As I tried to stress when I first started speaking, I'm in favour of affordable housing. I do recognise we have an urgent need for it, and it's a tantalising offer on. We don't very often get a site coming forward that's 100% affordable housing, but you've got to take into consideration the situation prevailing on the residents of Hellifield, and it's an attractive offer in the wrong place. Personal opinion. As far as your comments, by the way, on the site, all I would say is wait and see what happens. I do not believe if you're going to clear up the mud every time after they cover the road in mud, then that's another vehicle going up and down the road, and it'd be a sizable vehicle doing that. But frankly, I think that if you think that condition will work, so be it. But I think it will result in a mammoth problem for our enforcement officer. And in the meantime, the residents of Valleyfield, the best thing they could do is go on holiday, frankly, from certain periods of that construction, because I do not believe you can do the earth-moving works without having objectionably large equipment on site, and they will have to access the site direct, not at the established access to the site. It will have to come off the road onto the site where and when it's required, and it will be cobblers to any private agreement. What the contractors do and what the developer wants them to do will very often just pose conflict unlimited.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Sutcliffe. As you say, it will require careful monitoring by the applicant and by the case officer to ensure that the conditions are complied with at all times. Councillor Pringle and Councillor Liss, and remember that we're speaking to Councillor Brown's proposal of refusal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Of course, we all like affordable housing, and I know some members will vote for this, but in all honesty, just because it says affordable housing at the start of it, we don't have to forget all the other policies, and we don't have to forget things like the heritage advice. I have two problems with this scheme, and I also have a solution. My first problem is the heritage problem, and I am embarrassed that we have been recommended to pass this site before the information came to light that these members deferred for a month ago. We asked for heritage information. On the 10th of this month, we had a report saying, please pass this site. And since then, the heritage information that we asked for has come to light. So it's 100% clear that the officer who told us to pass it on the 10th of the 12th hadn't read the information that we deferred for. I find that embarrassing, and that's why the parish council said we shouldn't determine our own application. I have every sympathy for them. But when you study the heritage report, Councillor Brown's exactly right. The heritage man who we've paid splits the site into two halves. And he says, I don't really have a problem with the southern side of it. That's what he says. But he says, I don't like you knocking all those trees down in what is considered a strong contribution to the conservation area, which is the important Settle Carlisle Railway. And this will bring me to my proposed solution in a minute. But before we get there, let's just focus on exception sites. And I thank the barrister for coming back to me with his view that I've got to ignore profit. So I'll ignore profit, but it's out in the open that Craven District Council can potentially profit from this scheme. So let's not hide that anywhere. But let's look at exception sites, because there was a written ministerial statement on the 24th of the 5th of this year that the parish councillor referred to. And what that did was it did away with entry-level exception sites, and it brought in first home exception sites. And there's one fundamental difference between the two schemes. Well, there's lots of differences, but the main fundamental one that's important here is, whilst the old exception sites can go on in designated rural areas like Hellifield, the new one can't go on in rural areas. So basically what the government have said is, we don't want lots of affordable houses in rural areas. Now, the parish council have already brought up how many we're building, a ridiculous amount. I have it in writing from the planning officer, and I'm sure she'll agree with me that rural exception sites could apply to this. And rural exception sites might be the answer to this problem. Because if Craven District Council put in an application for a rural exception site, which will basically be the southern half, i.e. 5 houses, not 13, then I'm sure members would look at the heritage report and say, the heritage man's happy, and they may get a favourable response. But for us to pass this a week before the deadline, because if we don't pass it today, we can't pass it after the 29th, in the full knowledge that the rules are changing so that you're not supposed to build lots of affordable houses in rural areas like Hellifield. We know we can't do it in a week's time. For us to pass it today, well, if I was on the parish council, I would be even ruder about us than he was. I think the answer may be an application in the future for a rural exception site, which is smaller in scale, which will keep the trees and some biodiversity on half of the site. So I'm afraid to say that I know some of you are going to vote for it because it says affordable houses. I won't be voting for it, but if it comes back as a smaller scheme, I will seriously look at it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for that, Councillor Pringle. Again, just to reiterate that the time pressure is not a material consideration, but it was. I raised it at the beginning in my introduction, just to make members of the public and members of the council aware of the situation, but it is not a material consideration, and the next, sorry, Councillor Liss asked to speak next. Can I just say though, sorry, Councillor Liss, is that this is an opportunity for Craven District Council to use some of their land, and as we know, it's very unusual for private developers to dedicate a whole area of their land to affordable housing. Any money that comes from this development will go into the coffers of Craven District Council to help keep the council tax down for residents of Craven District. It's not going to be for providing private profit as it would in a private company. So, Councillor Liss, unless it's a point of order then.
Is that statement you've just made as our chairman a material consideration that Craven District, any profit made from this application will help the taxpayers of Craven?
No, it's not. No, it's not. Okay, right. No, it is not. It is purely my something that I felt need to be said at this point in time. Councillor Liss.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, I was going to say a good deal of what you've just said. However, in addition to that, it would be wonderful, would it not, if we had areas around our district, this wonderful district of ours, where we could build the exact match for the local plan in terms of affordable housing. Unfortunately, we haven't. And we have from time to take advantage of some of the land that we as a council own. That's happened to where I live. We've had 6 sites in Ingleton. There's another 2, I think, that are going to be coming in front of us. Every one of those for affordable housing has been approved, and long may that continue. We have 250 at least young people, mainly young people, looking for affordable housing. If you talk about profit, the profit's there. The profit of our young people have been able to have a house of their own for the future. What better profit could there be for us as councillors than that? It's I looked at the site this morning and I was somewhat mystified. To me, that is not the most wonderful site, the most wonderful copse of forest or any wooded area that I've seen. In fact, to be honest, there's a certain element of planning gain in this. Some of those trees, they're way past the best. They need managing. We had an application not too long back at National Park where there was some management needed for trees. That's what this site needs. And the notion of, yeah, we are going to lose some trees without question, but is that necessarily more important than providing young people with housing? I don't see that it is. I truly don't. No, the other just very quickly, Chairman, the other thing, it's been mentioned about a separate access to the play area. I can see that. I can see the point in that. But we, as a council, are providing a footpath in front of that housing site, which is going to take the young people, as far as we're concerned, on in the area of land that we're talking about, off the road. They're going to be on a footpath. So I'm somewhat at a loss again as to, you know, in terms of the impact of this particular site, what additional risk will there be for young people getting to the play area? I'm really quite puzzled. So you can probably gather from what I've said, I'm totally against the refusal of this application. So I'll be voting against the motion that's in front of us this afternoon. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. And just to clarify, I was not speaking as the applicant. I was speaking in favour of the officer's proposal and against the proposal of refusal. Councillor Sutcliffe. Oh, hang on, just a moment. Sorry. Case officer, nearly. Case officer wishes to speak.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to raise a couple of points that have been mentioned in terms of, one of them was not reading the information that's been provided. That's factually incorrect. All information is read and assessed, and an official professional opinion is based on what's in the report in terms of that. So I'm not really going to spend any time on that. One thing I did want to clarify in terms of the site, and this kind of, I suppose, disconnect in terms of that. We do have a site where half of the site, the southern site, the heritage advisor has said, yep, I'm quite happy with the southern site to be developed, but I'm not so happy with the northern site. When you look at the Settle and Carlisle conservation and what we were talking about earlier about important views, it's actually the southern site which is identified, not the northern site, as being important. Also as well, which is kind of why we are where we're at the moment in terms of what's the impact in terms of this development, in terms of this. But also as officers, we've had discussions with Historic England reference this development and whether they felt that this development would have an adverse impact to the level that they would actually want to be able to be taking part in terms of this. And following those discussions, they do not feel that this development, in terms of heritage impact, would have an unacceptable impact in terms of the conservation area, in terms of this. So I totally acknowledge the concerns of heritage in terms of this proposal, but what I would stress is that we have done a comprehensive assessment in terms of this based on all sorts of things, and you can see from that there is a conflict in terms of what our heritage officer says and Historic England have been put forward, but we feel that this site can be developed into such a way that it actually will be a positive thing moving forward, rather than what we've got at the moment, which when you look behind the site, you've got metal storage containers. Well, they don't really add anything to the conservation area that is in that area. So it was just to clarify that point where it was said that the northern was the most making a strong contribution. It's actually the southern part of the site that does, which is the one that John Hinchcliffe said that he was happy to develop.
Thank you. Councillor Shuttleworth.
Got it right, Chairman. Thank you. Yes, two comments. One very briefly as a subsequent comment to Councillor Liss's statement about the quality or lack of quality in the mature trees fronting part of the site. With the greatest of respect, I would suggest that our time of year when we've viewed those trees, they're at the worst. And if you were to view them in 6 months' time, or 6 months previously, it may well have been a totally different opinion that was expressed. I think those trees, all right, they aren't perfectly balanced, but they are natural trees. And nature isn't consistent and follows a definite pattern. That's enough of that. The other comment I'd like to make, which I feel is very important with regard to affordable first-time buyers. We have a private road where the liabilities for maintenance will relate to frontages, i.e. owners of property fronting onto the road. For someone who, shall we say, has struggled or found it difficult and hence goes for an affordable house, they're probably financially up to here. And there will be an onus on them, hopefully in the form of a legal agreement, that they will be liable for a contribution to road maintenance as and when it's necessary. The hitch comes with mortgage companies that where properties do front onto a private road, which falls short of the normally anticipated standard for an adopted road, mortgage availability tends to be restricted. And consequently, it seems to me that to provide affordable homes, but subject to a liability which wouldn't exist on a newly developed site with a road to a normally accepted standard, it's counterproductive. One works against the other. And there are far better sites where, in effect, a new road or an adopted road fronting the site would be more suited to the provision of affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Shuttleworth. Councillor Morell.
Thank you, Chair. Just one question that I'd like to ask. We heard in the officer's presentation, and again in answer to one or two questions, that the new green infrastructure, which would be part of this development, is going to be maintained and managed. Can I ask by who, please?
It will be by ourselves.
And who after 2023?
I don't have the answer to that.
Okay.
Sorry, can I? Sorry, I'm sorry. when you were saying you were meaning when Craven District Council no longer exists, it will be written into a legal agreement, so it will continue for 5 years beyond the permission as a normal standard requirement. Sorry, I misunderstood the question.
Who, after 2023, March 2023, when this council no longer exists, who will be responsible then?
It'll be the new authority that will take over. So it won't disappear. It will still be there because it is a legal agreement. So it'll be the new authority that takes over the management of it.
Well, my Chair. Say that it'll be a 5-year agreement. So after the 5-year period, who would then be responsible?
That would be something for the local authority at that time to discuss and make arrangements, I would expect.
Chair, if I may, the reason I bring that up is we've had a similar development in Sutton and Craven where it was a private company rather than a council who developed the site, and they had a 5-year agreement to maintain large areas of landscaping on that developed site. And after 5 years, they then tried to force the property owners to take full responsibility, and it ended in quite a nasty legal battle. So I wonder if we're not getting ourselves into similar deep water in this instance.
May, through you, Chair. I can acknowledge those concerns, and I think they're genuine concerns in terms of this, but I think this is slightly different, is that this is our own application. This is our own management of this. Yes, after 2023, we will no longer exist. We'll be absorbed into another authority. But again, it's going to be their responsibility. And I cannot see that an authority would kind of take those steps. I can see why a private company would do that, but I would not see that a local authority would do that, because they would not gain anything in terms of that for lots of different reasons. So I'm quite comfortable in terms of, even though the 5-year, we will be changing and another authority will take over, I'm still quite confident that that would still be taken into consideration and managed.
Okay, so I can see Councillor Brown's hand or pen is up. Are you going to give me, I think we've reached the end of the debate here, and so I'm now looking for a reason for refusal.
I just want to say one thing, and then I will give you 2 reasons for refusal. The first is this idea that mature trees sort of grow out and somehow deteriorate in value when they grow out. That's completely contrary to the advice of almost all tree experts, who recognise that mature trees are infinitely more valuable than young saplings, even quite big ones. There's any issue of them not being well maintained. Now, I've always been told that if a site is badly maintained, that is not a planning matter for us to consider. We should not go easy on an applicant or wave something through because the land has been shoddily treated, because when that's the case, we'd just be encouraging the others. And since this is in our own gift to manage the land well, it would be particularly inappropriate for us to wave aside considerations because the land had been badly managed. So basically, I realise this is a matter of balance, and I don't have a strong disagreement with anybody who has a different view to me, but I think that the grounds for refusal are ENV 2, B and C, and ENV 4B, and they are to do with significant loss of biodiversity on the north of the site, and affecting a heritage asset and conservation area by development north of the Wayleaf.
Could you say the second part again, please? Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Sutcliffe, you're the seconder.
If I may add some other reasons to it, Chairman, mine are very simple. First, I think it's affordable housing in the wrong place in terms of the ambience of the village of Hellifield. And whilst I accept it's a legal intrusion into the local plan, I still think that it's our decision as to whether we allow it or not. And that the local plan implications may be legal, but I don't think they're very attractive. And I think an inspector would perhaps come to the same view. And then my final objection is the condition of the present condition of the road is not suitable to provide access to a civil engineering exercise of this magnitude.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Brown, are you happy with those additions to your proposal? Yeah, well, we'll ask the planning manager that.
If I can just comment on the present condition of the road being unsuitable. If that became an issue, the construction company or whoever it was, either A, would have to make sure that it was suitable for construction traffic, and B, make it sound thereafter. So I don't think you can use that as a long-term reason for refusal, because you're basically saying, if you've understood things correctly, the road is unsuitable for construction traffic. But there's an engineering solution to that. Well, at a cost, yes, but nevertheless, there are solutions to it. That's not a planning reason for refusing an application.
Solution to it, Chair, would be to adopt the road moving, I think. Yes, I don't want to pull forward what we think is a serious issue, which would detract from our overall reasons for refusal. So I'll withdraw that one.
Okay, so I will ask Vicky to read out the reason for refusal before we go to the vote.
Okay, thank you, Chair. The reasons for refusal are ENV2, B and C, ENV4B, because of the significant loss of biodiversity on the northern side of the site, and it affects the heritage, asset and conservation area by development north of the Wayleaf. And then the other ones are affordable housing is in the wrong place at this site, and the local plan implications, because this site is outside of the local plan.
Okay, a proposer and seconder agree with that. So I'm going to go to the vote now. Oh, wait a minute. Case officer would like to say something.
No, Piers is indicating that he would like.
Oh, thank you. Piers, would you like to?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Part of my role, of course, if this is going to be a decision of the committee, is to make sure it's defendable if there were to be an appeal. And on that basis, I do need to raise the reason for refusal 3 and 4. I think there needs to be some reference to either a local plan policy or national policy. Those reasons need to be supported in some way by that. So can I ask the councillor to do that? The first 2 reasons for refusal, the councillor has done that, and they're very clearly rooted in local policy. I've not got a note of which local policy or national policy reason for refusal 3 or 4 are predicated on.
Okay, thank you, Piers. So we did hear from the planning manager that because it's an exception site, and correct me if I'm wrong here, that it does not go against the local plan. That's correct. So planning manager has confirmed that. Do you want to drop that one then? Or do you want to? I'm looking at both the proposer and the seconder at this moment in time.
I'm inclined to leave it there because I think on appeal, a planning inspector would not necessarily concur with that appeal.
Okay, that's fine. But am I right in saying that Craven District Council, as the applicant, does not have the what's the word? The ability to be able to go to appeal?
Well, realistically, the committee can make whatever decision that they make, but as how do we appeal as the council, the applicant, appealing against its own decision? You just can't do it. But that isn't a justification for just throwing the grape shot at it and saying, well, we're going to refuse it. You're entitled to make a decision on the application, but you've got to remember that we can't appeal our own decisions, but that in itself is not a justification for saying, well, let's just throw whatever reasons for refusal we want at the proposal.
Okay, just hang on a minute, Councillor Brown. I appreciate your help, but just give us a moment then. Members have heard the discussion about item 4 of the refusal, or the proposed refusal. So then we leave that to members. Item 3 about affordable housing being in the wrong place. This is between the proposer and the seconder. What policy? Thank you. What policy is based on that? Yeah, if you press your button, it'll turn me off. That's fine.
If I can help, it's basically page 56, tier 1 to 4, what's appropriate for tier 4A village, which is what Helifield's defined as in page 59 of the policy. So on page 56, it talks about what's appropriate for a tier 1 to 4, and on page 59, it classifies Helifield as a tier 4A. That's basically what we'd have to defend it on if we wish to use that.
Okay, thank you for that.
But the development in tier 4 settlement. Sorry. Those references to the tier 4 settlement refer to market housing.
Because it's a local plan.
Yeah.
Because it's a local plan, and as an exception site, this does not, it's not, yeah. Okay, so I'm afraid that doesn't stand. So you can either leave it with no reference, leave it in with no reference, take it out. You'll stick with the first two. Okay, so let's ask Vicky to read that out again.
So the first two were EMV 2B and C, EMV 4B, which were significant loss of biodiversity on the northern side of the site, and that it affects the heritage asset and conservation area by developing the north of the Wayleaf. That was the second one, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So proposer and seconder are happy with that. All members know what they're voting on. You're voting on refusal of this application, which is against officer's recommendation. So if you will, can I have a show of hands, please? All those for refusal. 6. All those against refusal. 4. So therefore, are there any abstentions? No. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. So in that case, then that application is refused. Thank you very much. We will go on to the next application. After a very short comfort break. Okay, members, I'm calling us to order, please. Thank you. The next application is 2021 23377. It's a full application. It's at 3 Albert Street, Skipton, and the applicant is Myers Properties. The case officer is ready to do her presentation. So if you'd like to take it away, please.
Yep, thank you, Chair. Yep, the application is before members as it is by a council member is the applicant. So the application is for a change of use of an existing retail unit to enable drinking establishment, which will actually form part of an existing drinking establishment. So I'll just run through members in terms of this. So this is the site, site location. So it is in the main area of the high street. It's just tucked off the back. It's in the conservation area. This is the actual site here. So what we've done in terms of the photographs, which you'll get to see in a moment, it is literally just the ground floor that is the subject of the application. Above that, let me just put my cursor on so you'll be able to see. There we go. So this is the application site that we've got here. Now, this is the site, which is the Oakley's restaurant. That's the one that's next door and also has the level over this one as well. So it has the first floor. So as I mentioned, it's just the ground floor. This image down here is just to show you that there is another retail opposite the site completely. And then if you look down that area in terms of this, you've got retail areas, cafes, microbars and everything else all around this particular area. There is residential area here in terms of this, but when seeking advice from the environmental health team in terms of whether there'd been any complaints or anything in terms of noise, they've come back and they've received no complaints of noise in terms of this site or the adjacent residential or public houses. Right, so this is the existing business here, which is the beer engine. Okay, so that's been operating for a number of years now within the main built-up area of Skipton. This is the actual premises here that is seeking a change of use in terms of it. And as you can see, just upstairs, this is what I was mentioning earlier that belongs actually to Oakley. So that's the restaurant area in terms of that. So it's additional upper floor restaurant area. In terms of what is proposed externally, this is to show you what's there at the moment. So you've got the access coming in, you've got your ground floor area, and then you've got number 1, the Albert Street, in terms of this one here, which is the existing premises that's operating. So in terms of what is proposed, as we can see externally, there are no alterations at all. It is really about the internal alteration. So there's going to be a breakthrough between number 1 and number 3, and this is to increase the floor space in terms of the operating premises that currently operates from in terms of that. So it's really to help grow the existing business in terms of what we've got coming forward. So just in a nutshell, the proposal is for the expansion of an existing operating business in a central town location. There are obviously the social and economic benefits in terms of this. It's not considered that the expansion at ground floor level in this location, considering what we've got around it, that there would be any unacceptable amenity issues, and therefore it's considered that the proposal accords with the requirements of the local plan, subject to the conditions imposed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. There are no members of the public asked to speak. There's no parish council, no applicant or applicant's agent wish to speak. The ward councillors are councillors Noland and Whitaker, neither of which are here today. Is this a point of order, or are you anticipating the debate? Okay, wave away, wave away. From that point of view, I'll go straight into the debate.
I can see no reasons whatsoever to object to this application and so move approval.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Heseltine. There is seems to be quite a number of people raising their hands. Councillor Rose, are you wishing to second this application? Of course, a seconder, why not?
I see no reason at all to refuse it. It fits in very neatly with this particular area of town with respect to, can I say, sensible drinking establishments and eateries. And as there have been no complaints previously with respect to noise nuisance for those residents within the same area, whilst that was raised as a possible area of concern by the town council, which was totally acceptable and understandable, because there haven't been any previous complaints. Whilst we can make note of it, I don't see any reason at all why it should be refused. Thank you.
Okay, it's been proposed and seconded for officer's recommendation of approval. Councillor Sutcliffe, you had your hand up first, and then Councillor Shuttleworth.
Oh, very briefly, Chairman. I just wanted to endorse Councillor Rose's thoughts on the matter. This property has been in the ownership of the Myers family for over 100 years. And as you say, there's been real problems in the recent period. So I'm quite happy to support it as well.
Councillor Shuttleworth.
Thank you, Chairman. It's just a question about the condition 3 of the recommended approval. The premises shall only be open for trade or business between 12 noon to 22 hours Monday to Saturday and 12 noon to 22 hours on Sundays. Why the difference when the timing's the same?
I did question that when I actually read the report. That was what was on the application form. Why they did it like that, I don't know. But it would be much easier to say shall be open from 12 till noon Monday to Sunday or Sunday to Saturday. It just needs clarifying. I don't know why the applicant actually filled the form in, but it was, when I read the report, it's just simply been lifted off the application form.
Councillor Heseltine seems.
Let there be light. That's better. I understand where the planning authority and the licensing authority will fix the hours.
Oh, we've had this debate before, haven't we? No. Okay, so, right. No one else has indicated to speak, so I'm going to go to the vote. It's been proposed and seconded for officer's recommendation. All those in favour of approval, please raise your hands. That's unanimous for approval. Thank you very much. Okay, so we have a little bit to do here because with it being a hybrid meeting, one of the speakers is going to join us remotely. So that needs to happen somehow. In the meantime, we'll just, if you just bear with us for a moment. Right, okay, so the next application is 2021 22615. It's an outline application by Mr. and Mrs. V. Drakenberg, and the site address is land north of the old coach house, Tosside, Skipton. I'm going to ask the case officer if she will give us her presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair. This has come back before committee. As members will remember, the last time it was before them, there was a request for the applicant to revisit the application in terms of potentially coming forward with a legal agreement. This was in line or with the aim of trying to meet the requirement of SP4 criteria K, and then looking at A, the proposal would meet an essential need for a rural worker to live permanently or near their place of work at the countryside. So that's what members were hoping to seek. Since that time, the case officer and the applicant and agent did sit down, did have discussions in terms of the feasibility of a such legal agreement based on the fact that it also needed to supply or be supported by policy. Also at that meeting, a couple of other options were discussed to give the applicant further options. One of them was obviously to put forward a total affordable site, or the other one was to look and see if they could create something of an exceptional design. At the time of coming before members today, we have not seen any legal agreement being put forward or any evidence to say that there is a need for the two dwellings on this site. So therefore, the proposal in terms of its recommendation for refusal remains as it was previously. So that was just to give you a summary of what has happened in the meantime. So as mentioned, this is an outline application with access, layout and scale considered for two detached storey dwellings out in Tosside. So the presentation itself is not very long. Let me just see if I can work this because this is on a PDF. Right, okay. So in terms of the actual site itself, it relates to a parcel of land about 0.09 hectares. There is stables on part of the site, and you can just about see my cursor in terms of this. So access up off the road through here leads into this area here. Now there is a bit of gravel that comes along here, and there's an access into this garage area here. The old coach house does not belong to the applicant, it's in separate ownership. This is the vicarage, which is the tea rooms in this area here. So as you come into here, there is kind of like when we went to site the other week, this was being used as a paddock area. It had a wire fencing around it in terms of that. And then in this area up here, there is some stables. And again, that's being used as a paddock area in terms of that. The remaining part of this area here is all open fields in terms of it. Now, in terms of the actual principle of the development itself, as set out within the officer's report, the sorts of development in terms of housing out in the open countryside, the policy does allow for exceptions to that. But in this instance, the policy is very clear as to what is considered to be outside in the open countryside. And the definition within the policy, it says, relates to point 2, gardens, paddocks and other undeveloped land within the curtilage of buildings on the edge of a settlement where land relates more to surrounding countryside than to the main built-up area of the settlement. Now in this instance, the site definitely relates more to the open countryside than it does to any main built-up area. You can stand in this area here looking across to open fields and beyond, and similarly when you're looking up in terms of this area here. Behind it is a plantation, so again that's separated from any built form in terms of this. The site itself is approximately 7 miles from Settle. Giggleswick is also 7 miles, and then if you look into Clitheroe, there's also a 12-mile distance as well. So for a proposal to be considered acceptable in this location, it would need to have been demonstrated that it could meet any of the criteria in K of policy SK4. Unfortunately, this proposal hasn't been able to demonstrate that it would be essential for the need of a rural worker. Now, just to provide some clarity in terms of that, When we're saying a rural worker, we're looking at somebody who works in agriculture or forestry or other land-based rural enterprising. That's what's the sort of thing we're looking at. It's physical work and actively contributing to the management of the land. Obviously, the applicant in this instance, I believe, works part-time in the tea room and part-time has another occupation as well. If they had been able to come forward in terms of the rule, there's still a requirement that they would have to demonstrate that there is a need. Now, we've got 2 houses being proposed on this site with no evidence that there is a farming complex that needs the 2 houses in terms of this one. So there would have been a number of steps that the applicant would need to do. If he had been able to come forward and demonstrate that there was a farming or agricultural enterprise that was farming the land and that needed a building, there would still be a question, did it need 2 buildings or 1 building? Because it needs to demonstrate that there is a functional need for a full-time rural worker to operate from that site. Obviously, from a tea room, you do not need to be a full-time location in terms of being nearby. And then there also needs to be demonstrated that there is a financial viability in terms of needing those dwellings. So in terms of what we've got before us, it is an outline. So in terms of the proposal, so there's not a lot to consider. So in terms of that, it was the principle was the key thing, that the proposal was contrary to the local plan, and the assessment in terms of it being out in the open countryside is something that has been supported recently in appeal decisions that the council has defended successfully in terms of that. It's not considered because, if I turn on the other elements, in amenity, given their location, it's not considered there would have been any amenity issues in terms of that. Similarly, no highways issues in terms of it. It comes down basically to the fact that the proposal is contrary to the requirements of SP4 criteria KA, as requested by members in terms of a legal agreement coming forward. And in the absence of any evidence, it's unable to be supported and is still recommended for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that presentation. We now go on to the speakers. No one has offered to speak for the parish council, which the parish council is the Ribblebanks. Thank you. Yeah, no one's offered to speak from Ribblebanks. Okay, no one is speaking on behalf of the objectors. We do, however, as has happened in the past with objectors, have 2 speakers for the applicant and applicant's agent. Have we? Mr. Yeah. Okay, so it's just one, right. Just updating myself on the latest information is that the speaker will be Mr. Drachenberg. Mr. Drachenberg, if you could come forward, please. We have, but he will speak after you. Thank you for that. So if you want to, when you get to the microphone, if you just settle yourself down, you've got 5 minutes in which to speak. And before you turn your microphone on, if you could just make sure you understand that you've got 5 minutes to speak and you'll be timed. If you want to turn your microphone on and
Okay. Can everyone hear me? Okay, thank you. Dear Sir and Madam, I'm Aaron, son of applicant. Thank you for allowing me to speak for a second time. I would also like to thank those who attended the site viewing on Wednesday, 15th of December, and those who attended the site viewing earlier today. I've lived a huge portion of my life in Tosside, working locally on the outskirts of Slaburn, and also work alongside my parents' well-established vicarage tea room that has become the hub of a busy tourist industry that is Gisborne Forest Mountain Bike Trail Park. In 2012, my parents obtained planning consent for the change of use from residential premises for the tea room restaurant. This business is operating 6 days a week, providing both eat-in and take-away meals. Is licensed and created 3 full-time and 5 part-time positions. Both Google and TripAdvisor have given us a 5-star rating. I grew up in Tosside, and my wish is for my 2 boys, Oscar and Alfie, 4 and 9, to help sustainability of the village, a generation giving new life to the village and putting down roots for years to come. The proposed site borders on an existing hamlet within the grounds of the vicarage and is enclosed by traditional dry stone walls and bordered by established woodland. There has been support from the villagers living nearby. No objections have been received from highways, parish councils or environmental agencies. We consider the application does fulfil the criteria required for development as a Tier 5 area under SP4 as shown in small scale development in the next village of Wigglesworth, which was granted permission back in June of this year. This is also a Tier 5 area. Our application is needed for family members of the old vicarage to live in the village of Tosside and to support our successful family-built business. This application outlines planning permission with some matters reserved for the construction of 2 dwellings, houses utilising existing compact stone driveway. The planning officer clearly ignored the existence of the residential properties that exist along Longton's Lane boundary with the Ribble Valley. These dwellings extend over 50 metres north of our proposed development. Clearly 13 properties at this location integral part of Tosside village and can't be dismissed when considering the merits of our proposal. The stables located north of the site are mounted on skis. The detached stable is a mobile unit that is considered permanent development and does not require planning consent. The proposed residential properties will incorporate high levels of sustainability of local planning (OTH) at reserved matters stage, should outline consent be granted. Policy SP4 allows new developments in such locations so long as small scale, proportionate, complementary and character and appearance consistent with the role of functions of the settlement will conserve the character of the appearance of the countryside and avoid contributing towards coalescence of the settlements. It's our view that the proposal meets the 4 side criteria. The proposed properties will both face east. To the west of the application site is Mature Woodland under ownership of the church. The copse provides established screening from the views of Longton Lane. In terms of national planning policy framework (NPPF), there is presumption in favour of all forms of sustainable development, providing the benefits of allowing development and not outweighing disbenefits that may arise. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, and I omitted to mention that we did have a site visit this morning. It was a second site visit, and the reason for that was because, unfortunately, the parish council and the applicant was not informed of the first site visit and therefore did not have the opportunity to take part or attend the site visit. So I do apologise for that. Next speaker is the ward councillor, Councillor David Staveley, who is joining us remotely through Teams. So we think we need the case officer. Are you going to join them? Ah, there we go. Okay, we can see you now, Councillor Staveley. Thank you. Oh, we see part of you. There we go. Right. Can you hear us okay, first of all? We'll just do a sound check. Can you hear us okay?
I can hear you. You're looking somewhat distant and abstract, I may say, but you're there. I can tell you.
Okay, no change there then. Right, thank you. If you would like, you're not limited to 5 minutes, but obviously, you know, we don't want you to go on forever. And if you'd like to just introduce yourself, please, and then give us your presentation.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor David Staley, as I'm sure you all know, ward representative for Settle Middlebanks ward, including what would appear to be half of Tosside. Obviously, I've sent a written representation when this application was first heard, outlining my concerns that the grounds for refusal were underpinned on the misconception that this site was in open countryside. We find ourselves in the same position today, somewhat of a groundhog situation, dare I say, bearing in mind members of the planning committee were good enough to go to the site twice. I think the interesting thing that's come out from today is the situation, and it is a bizarre situation where, because of the proximity to the border with Lancashire, which obviously is another planning authority, planning officers are not allowed to take into consideration the developments on Longton Lane, which quite clearly demonstrate the footprint, shall we say, of the village of Tosside. Going forward from that, we are then in a situation where the officer report states that on the 3 sides it is open countryside as this site, which, as I say, I would take exception to. We have on one side the open countryside. To the north, there is an element of countryside beyond the curtilage of the original vicarage, but to the other side is the plantation. And at the far side of the plantation is Longton Lane and the substantial development, which is called also the plantation, which is a residential development of some several houses that, as has been already stated, extends beyond the sight lines of this application. Now, I think it is important that we don't get into the situation where the last person on the row is unfairly disadvantaged because they are the last person on the row. Yes, somebody has to live on the edge of the village, but this is within the curtilage of the old vicarage. It is no further out from the building line to the north than the existing plantation. The fact that it's a small scale development leaves us in a situation where I would ask members to take a value judgment on this, away from the restraints of the larger scale developments criteria from the local plan, and allow this family to make use of what they've got to allow them to continue their tenure in this village. Opportunities in a place like Tosside are few and far between for residential properties, and quite clearly villages like this are struggling. We all lament their passing as we see village life eroded further and further through a lack of new blood coming in or being retained. In this day, we have a chance to change that. We can give this permission and allow this family to come in and stay where they were born and wish to continue to live. And it won't require anything more than merely addressing an issue that comes forward from the duty to cooperate. I say the duty to cooperate because for some strange reason, we do not have a duty to cooperate with the adjoining planning authority on this matter. We will ask the National Park for their opinion for sites which are more than a mile away from the boundary of the National Park, and that will carry great weight. The Forest of Bowland will give an opinion, and that will carry great weight. And yet somehow we're in a situation where the chairman of the parish council of Tosside, the village that this development is in, is not allowed to speak to you as a committee because it's in the adjoining planning authority and there isn't a duty to cooperate and consult them on this planning application. Nay, you are not allowed, according to the officer report, as I understand it from today's site visit, you are not even allowed to consider Longton Lane and the plantation development at the other side of it. For once, I would ask the committee to disregard the officer recommendation in this matter and give the approval that natural justice would demand. Thank you, members.
Thank you very much, Councillor Staveley. Do you just does he stay with us? Can he hear continue to hear the debate? Okay, right, thank you, that's great. So that concludes the speakers. I'm just going to ask Mr. Watson, the planning manager, if he and the case officer, if they have anything they would like to add.
Chairman, if I could just comment on the point that Councillor Staveley was making about not taking account any views from Ribble Valley, Ribble District. That indeed is the case, but it's not. Physically, we will have looked at this site taking into account the physical development that is on site, irrespective of where the local authority boundary is. And the important thing, I think, to point out to members and to have the understanding is that just because you've got development on one side of a road, forgetting where the district boundary is, just because you've got development on one side of the road doesn't justify putting development on the other side of the road, which is clearly in open countryside. And clearly from the site visit that we carried out last week and indeed this morning, there is a clear perception that that does not form part of the main built-up area of a Tier 5 settlement in any case. But more importantly, whatever there may have been historic curtilages to the old vicarage, it's very clear to me and evident from what is on site that there is no evidence of a curtilage apart from a dry stone wall that runs up the western side of the boundary. Visually, that is paddock, and policy SP4K has some exclusions to it as well, notwithstanding what may be acceptable in Tier 5 settlements, but it specifically excludes gardens and paddock. And I would, it doesn't take an awful lot to say that what you were looking at today was a paddock with a stable in with 2 horses on it. That is a paddock. That is a specific exclusion to policy SP4K. So you can't tag it on and say, well, it was part of a curtilage, part of a garden, part of a paddock. It very clearly to me was a paddock, and I would find it very difficult if members could argue with me to say that a piece of land with a stable on it and 2 horses standing in that paddock was anything other than a paddock. That's all I want to add, Chairman. We'll answer any further questions if necessary.
Okay, thank you. Case officer.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Not sure where that was. Yeah, just to clarify in terms of this, I've put the slide up on the screen again for members to view in terms of this. The assessment in terms of this site, we can see it is open when you're looking straight out from there across, you would look across the views of the valley in terms of this. If you're looking at that, it is open. There is no built form in that area. There's no built form there. And if you go behind the site, yes, if you cross over the road, there is built form, but right next to this site, there is no built form. So what you have is you have the proposal for 2 dwellings, almost you could ask, it's potentially ribbon development out in the open countryside on a site that is clearly in the open countryside. It meets the criteria as Neville Watson has kindly set out in terms of the exceptions. And it is something that the council defended quite successfully in Carlton, where we had not quite a similar thing, but it was an open site. There was a road, and that road was actually closer to this than this property. And the planning inspectorate agreed that it was out in the open countryside and that none of the exceptions to why it should be allowed applied. Now, in this instance, we've had no justification. We've given the applicants ample time to go away and see if they can come up with a justification for this in terms of a rural workers dwelling. Nothing has come forward for the officers to consider in terms of that. So unfortunately, as far as we're concerned, it is a site that is out in the open countryside with no justification for that development. So I just wanted to clarify that for you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, I was just checking on the public planning website, and there is a response from Ribble Valley Borough Council, and they were consulted, and the response is that they have no objections, but they requested that detailed consideration be given to the sustainability of the residential development, and also consideration to the impact on the local highway and the landscape character of the adjacent forest of Bowland. So, I'm going to open this up to debate, but before I do that, can I just ask the question, please? SP4K, is that a Craven District Council policy?
It is, yes.
Okay, thank you. So people indicating to speak, I'm sorry, I wasn't looking. I don't know if Councillor Rose was first or if you were first. Councillor Rose.
Just an ask, on page 36 of the officer's report, it does say consent for the construction of 2 4-bedroomed 2-storey dwellings. Again, that doesn't bring to my mind a rural workers' dwelling. I may be being a bit presumptuous there, quite accept that. But is it a 4 or a 3-bedroomed? I think last week at the site visit, there was a bit of confusion there. Thank you.
Yep, if I can through you, Chair. Yep, it is actually 3-bed properties that are being proposed in terms of that. But as you rightly say, in terms of whether it would be a rural agricultural workers dwelling, that would need to have been assessed against the functional need of any operation.
Sorry, through you, Chair. So that means this report's incorrect then? It says 4, so it should have read 3.
Councillor Brown.
Yeah, well, all my natural sympathies are with Councillor Staveley and the applicant. I mean, we obviously want villages to survive. It's a great business, and I think the emotional appeal is strong. But we're not here to determine whether we like people. We're here to determine whether things comply with the local plan or not, or else we would simply be saying on every application, you know, is this a nice person or not? We have to follow the rules, even when the rules are not necessarily particularly helpful to decent people. First rule here is it in open countryside? Well, if you look below it, you can see probably, what, 20, 30 miles? And of course, people from 20, 30 miles away can see it. So it's certainly open countryside below and out from it. So 2 sides could not be more open countryside if you tried. I think we all learned on the visits, and I've certainly learned cycling there, you know, quite how high up on the hill and remote it is. If you take the Lancashire side, there is this woodland which I walked into and saw in the summer, which had some very unusual and rare mushrooms growing in it, so it's clearly been a woodland for a long time. Then there is a road, then there is some distance, and then there are some houses. Those are far enough away, so I think regardless of whether it's in Lancashire or Yorkshire, I would still regard that as open countryside on that side, which leaves us only the end of the row. And one of our policies is I think that things should be inside the curtilage of the village, not stuck on the end of the row. And if we allowed things to be stuck on the end of the row, we'd be extending all our villages. So basically, it fails the test of anything other than open countryside. So to me, it's on open countryside. We then, last time, tried to bend over backwards and see if we could find 2 exceptions. And the only 2 exceptions that were possible were it's for rural workers or it is genuinely innovative design. Well, given we want it to be in keeping with the village, the only possible area for innovative design would be some fantastic environmental gain, such as ground source heating or something like that. So they'd have to come back with something radical on that front for it to go through on innovative design. And it fails both those tests. We've given them months to try and come up with it. They haven't come up with it. So we have to, I think, reject it, and I have to propose rejection. The only thing I would say is I think, Councillor Staveley, in terms of spatial planning, I think our policy might be out of date because modern rural businesses, you know, that most farms these days run something beyond physical labour farming, and we need to look in our spatial plans as to whether we can include something so that hotels that need to build accommodation for their workers, cafes like this that want to get family accommodation, might get an exception, but we don't have that policy at the moment, and we can't pass on a policy we might like to have but haven't got. Therefore, again, it has to be a rejection.
Okay, thank you. It's been proposed for officers' recommendation. Yes, yeah. Are you seconding that?
I'm happy to second that, yes. I'd like to speak as well. SP4 is a very important document, as Councillor Staveley will know, having been involved in writing it. I wish that our officers would read it every week, because I think it would prevent development in some of our villages that we've seen in the past. This officer has got it, in my opinion, spot on. Whether you consider the buildings that are in the other county or not, this, in my opinion, is open countryside. And I know some people may not agree, and you're allowed not to agree, but I would be very surprised if a majority of this committee didn't think this was in open countryside. It's clearly in open countryside. I think the officer is spot on, should be commended. The one thing I would say is I feel sorry for the applicant, and I would ask the planning manager and the barrister, is there scope for them? It's never going to be a farm workers dwelling because it's not a farm. Is there scope for the applicant to come to us with a unilateral agreement which says, I will tie these two properties to the main property, the cafe, so that they can never sell them separately? Because if they're allowed to do that, and they will do that, I think that might satisfy the members of this committee enough to pass it, because we all agree that there isn't too many problems with it in aesthetic terms and highway terms, and we'd like to help the gentleman. If he was prepared to come forward with a unilateral agreement, and I think I've seen it in a previous life, which tied three properties together, can't be sold separately, could we do that?
Chairman, I think if come back on that one. I think a unilateral obligation would be inappropriate in this particular case. There are situations where we've tied properties together, but essentially in this particular case, what you will be saying is you would be attempting to overcome the policy objection to the development just by saying, look, give me a house because I'm a nice guy, and I'll promise I won't sell it separately from the old vicarage. So it would almost be tantamount to saying, I'll promise you the earth, give me a planning permission. And that doesn't overcome the policy objection to it. So therefore you're taking personal circumstances into effect which are not appropriate in the determination of an application in this form. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Watson. Just to clarify then, this policy is a Craven District Council policy, not a national policy, and therefore as members of the planning committee we can go against Craven District Council's own policy. Oh,
I would certainly not to advise you going against your own policy, because that's what I sit here every month of the year doing. And what's the point in having a local plan if you're going to simply say, well, we've got the local plan, but we're not going to bother with it? It is a Craven policy, but by the same token, the advice, and it's long-standing advice that goes back long before the NPPF, but it's still embodied in that, is that there is a general presumption in favour of sustainable development taking place within settlements, not building out in the countryside. And that's the basis and the starting position that's there. If you start and say that this is countryside, and I'll listen to the rest of the debate, but if you accept that this is countryside, there is a clear direction in the local plan at policy SP4 and SP4K specifically. But the policy is written in a way where it gives you the option of potential exceptions. But you've got to say, and if you look at SP4KA, the proposal will meet the essential need of a rural worker. So even if you accept the position that someone working in a remote cafe in the countryside is a rural worker, is it essential for them to actually live there? And no, they can get on the bike and cycle to the nearest settlement, or worse, if it worse comes to worse, they get in a car and drive to the local settlement. But you don't need, you would have to demonstrate a need, and that's where we gave them the opportunity to do it. They would have to demonstrate the need for two other people, two independent potentially families, why they need to live next to the cafe. And I really struggle with that argument. So on that basis, it is local policy. I'd urge you not to dispose of your local policy. They haven't met any of the exceptions, and therefore the recommendation I would put as far as strongly recommend refusal.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Rose.
Thank you. This is going to be observation with respect to some of the aspects of Councillor Staveley's presentation. If we are looking at maintaining these hamlets, small villages, and preventing them from, you know, dying on the vine or whatever one might wish to say, yes, it makes sense to encourage people to stay put and therefore to provide housing. Again, the point about diversification from the farming point of view, admittedly, this isn't linked to a farm, but it is, you know, you could argue it's a bit of diversification to keep a business going. For future reference, is it a point that could be raised when it comes to reviewing, would it be spatial planning and the local plan in future? Because things are changing, there's no doubt about it. And we are desperate to keep people living within the countryside. I mean, in this situation, I'm not going to support the actual application, but for me, it's raising some important issues about what we are looking for in the long term. We want to keep people here in Craven